A king stands on a balcony over Jerusalem with everything under his feet and an ache in his chest that refuses to move. Gold shipments arrive year after year. Exotic animals fill royal gardens. Musicians never stop. The royal treasuries record 666 talents of gold annually, just as the court historian notes in 1 Kings 10. 700 wives, 300 concubines, 40 years of reign across the 10th century BCE, the best education, money, and diplomacy can secure. The king knows all the proverbs and all the loopholes. Then, the cold sentence lands like a stone dropped in a deep well, and the echo keeps coming. Vanity of vanities, says the teacher. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. A better word glints underneath. Evel, breath, vapor. A mist catching light for a moment and gone. That opening line refuses to smile for the camera. It strips away the illusion that crowns pause the wind. The book of Ecclesiastes does not apologize. It steps into the party and flips the lights on at 3 a.m., the moment everyone sees what time has done. Most people meet Ecclesiastes like a friend of a friend, and the introduction is awkward. The first verse behaves like a title card. The words of Koheleth, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Koheleth comes from a verb about assembling, gathering an audience, calling a meeting. The teacher gathers a crowd with a voice that sounds both ancient and contemporary. Then a narrator steps in and out, like a careful editor. He frames the teacher's words at the beginning and the end, in 1, 1, and 12, 9, 14, signing the whole work with a final reminder about judgment. The shape matters. A voice inside a voice. A royal experiment locked inside a wisdom collection, handled with tongs. The narrator respects the teacher, but also fences him, as if to say, listen closely, but do not drive without the seatbelt. It is not neat. It is Israelite wisdom speaking with sore feet and bad weather. The Hebrew vocabulary does not shout pious slogans. Devil runs like a watermark from the first line to the last. The phrase, under the sun, repeats almost 30 times. Not everywhere, not in heaven, but here in the heat of noon, where crops grow and funerals march. Another term refuses to let go, chasing after the wind. Reut ruach. The picture sets as clear as glass. A runner sprints after a gust and ends with an armful of air. The teacher lists every human ambition next to that image. Knowledge, pleasure, palaces, business empires, even morality and legacy. A whole ledger of projects and pride. He stares them down with the stubbornness of someone who tried everything. Scholars still wrestle with the author's identity. Jewish tradition tags Solomon, the son of David and king in Jerusalem, reigning around 970 to 931 BCE. The internal hints fit the persona. He says in past tense, I, the teacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem, 1:12. He reports massive building programs, lavish feasts, incomparable wisdom. The political map and the economic numbers match the Solomon files. The words also surprise with turns of Hebrew that sound later, like centuries after exile later. Aramisms whisper through lines. The grammar sometimes lands with an accent no one would expect from the 10th century. The book wears this tension with no embarrassment. A Solomonic voice in literary theater. Either Solomon himself near the dusk of life, or a later sage writing with a Solomonic mask that every reader recognizes. Either way, the wisdom hits the same nerve. The teacher lights a fire under optimism. The first target is the myth that knowledge saves anyone from sadness. I applied my heart to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. 1:13. The verdict rocks the classroom. In much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. 1:18. The teacher does not praise ignorance. He documents a ceiling. Wisdom sees patterns. Wisdom notices injustice. Wisdom also notices that graves equalize PhDs and folk sayings without a negotiation. Under the sun, the wise die just like the fool. 2:16. The edge of the blade cuts both ways, and that is the point. Brilliance is a light at noon. You see more, and nothing changes the sun. He then tries the experiment everyone loves to fund. Pleasure. Controlled, curated pleasure. Not reckless chaos, but considered design. He builds houses, plants vineyards, lays out gardens with irrigation projects. 1 Kings lists corollaries, and the echo feels intentional. Wine flows, laughter fills rooms, treasures pile up, the metrics peak. Ecclesiastes 2 reads like a royal audit, yet the conclusion pulls the rug. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had expended in doing it. And, behold, all was hevel and a chasing after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. 2:11. Nothing to be gained uses the word yithron, advantage, lasting profit, permanent surplus after costs, a life ledger that refuses to show black ink in the line that matters most. The teacher enjoys. The teacher laughs. The teacher knows the hangover in the soul that ignores brunch mimosas. Work becomes the next altar. The teacher goes hard. All the energy of achievement pours into projects that change skylines. The text lists slaves, herds, silver chests, choirs. The resume reads like a museum catalog. A slam line interrupts the tour. I hated all my toil in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. 2:18. Legacy looks noble in speeches. In account books, it looks fragile. The man who comes after may be wise or a fool. Kings hand palaces to sons who sell the pillars for quick cash. CEOs retire into decades of reading reports about the company name as a cautionary case study. Ecclesiastes names that dread with brutal simplicity. So I turned about and gave my heart up to despair. 2:20. The teacher's despair is not a tantrum. It is the dawning awareness that human control has a leash, and the leash looks shorter at 60 than it looked at 25. The shock emerges in the middle of these dark tests, a sudden ray across the page. There is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. 2:24. The words do not cancel the Hebel verdict. They stand with it. The enjoyment arrives as a gift. For apart from him who can eat, or who can have enjoyment. 2:25. Apart from God, food tastes like cardboard in gold plates. With God, a simple meal lands as a miracle on a Tuesday. This refrain returns again and again like a chorus. The teacher refuses to promise that people can secure meaning. He proclaims that people can receive joy. That difference changes everything. Performance versus present. Possession versus portion. The book uses the word chelik, portion, lot, the share given by a good God in a confusing world. When this breaks through, the teacher smiles inside sentences. Then comes the poem that almost everyone knows by heart, even if they never found it in Ecclesiastes. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven. 3:1. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to pluck up what is planted. The pairs keep swinging like a pendulum across the alphabet of life. This is neither a motivational poster nor a fatalistic shrug. The imagery reads like a farmer's calendar and a soldier's diary. There are days to laugh without guilt. There are days to weep with both hands. There are seasons when silence is gold, and seasons when speaking up is the only honest way forward. The poem sets a frame that humbles the hustler and steadies the exhausted. God has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. 3:11. Eternity in the heart feels like a bird beating wings inside a rib cage. The horizon calls and the fog holds. The teacher nods to both. The next move aims its spear at injustice. I saw under the sun that in the place of justice even there was wickedness. 3:16. Courtrooms can host bribery. Boards can protect predators. The teacher does not blink. He names God as the final judge who will weigh everything. He also notes how mortality deconstructs pride. Man and beast share dust at the end. One event happens to them all. 3:19. The burial ground flattens titles into dates on stone. This is not cynicism for sport. It is a moral clarity that refuses to let anyone market optimism that bypasses widows and wage theft. The teacher calls exploitation by its name, and then turns again to gift language. There is nothing better than to be joyful and to do good, as long as one lives. 3:12. The tightrope continues. Enjoy and do good. Receive and revere. Another passage hits like a whistleblower report. Again, I saw all the oppressions that are done under the sun, the tears of the oppressed, and they had no one to comfort them. 4:1. Ecclesiastes refuses to let the powerful claim that bright skylines mean moral success. Life under the sun includes sweatshops and funeral cuts in obscure neighborhoods. The teacher even says, the dead can seem more fortunate than the living, and the not yet born can seem most fortunate of all. 4:2-3. Ancient realism holds up a mirror to 21st century headlines. Then a surprising pivot. Two are better than one. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. 4:9-12. This is not wedding poetry first. It is survival strategy in a hostile climate. Shared warmth in a cold night. A companion who pulls you up on the trail. The teacher respects adjacency as a defense against despair. The teacher slips into a parable about kingship without fairy dust. Better was a poor and wise youth than an old and foolish king who no longer knew how to take advice. 4:13. A crowd swells around the newcomer. The crowd fades almost as fast. He acknowledges the short-term memory of public admiration. Those who come later will not rejoice in him. 4:16. The appetite for novelty rides the same carousel every generation. Then the scene shifts to the temple. Guard your steps when you go to the house of God. 5:1. The teacher warns against sacrificial theater and blizzard vows. Many words in worship equal risk. Say less and mean it. Do not let your mouth lead you into sin. 5. The God of heaven does not need human noise to secure attention. Fewer words, more reverence. More listening, fewer slogans. This alone feels subversive in religious cultures, where volume masquerades as devotion. Money pulls the teacher's energy like a magnet, because money draws almost everyone's energy like a magnet. He says it flat. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money. 5:10. A collector of coins ends with an itch that new coins cannot scratch. Riches bring new managers and nightmares. The sleep of a laborer is sweet, whether he eats little or much, but the abundance of the rich will not let him sleep. 5:12. The parable of a hoarder who loses everything to a bad venture appears like a play within a play. 5:13-17. Naked he came, naked he returns. The sheet at the end has no pockets. Then the refrain appears again with sweetness, sharp as any medicine that tastes like honey. Behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun the few days of his life that God has given him. 5:18. Few days. Honest counting. A tender line follows. God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. Occupied is a job description no one brags about in an age of optimization. Stillness from God can be a full-time assignment. The teacher dignifies it. A hard paradox arrives like a drill bit. There is a man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing. Yet God does not give him power to enjoy them, and a stranger enjoys them. 6:2. Power to enjoy does not arrive in a suitcase with the money. It arrives by grace. The teacher says 70 years or 100 years of grinding acquisition without contentment yields a net negative. He returns to the grave, the same destination. The argument does not quit. Anyone steering life by acquisition alone is driving on ice. Wisdom returns to the frame in chapter 7, with proverbs that operate like pressure tests. A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of birth. 7:1. The teacher pulls everyone into the house of mourning. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness of face the heart is made glad. 7:3. The paradox offends entertainment culture. The point is sharp. Fun can numb or clarify. Grief can destroy or deepen. The wise prefer a wake to a circus, because sometimes the future is born in a room where stories end. A list of better thans continues with advice about patience over pride, wisdom over anger, and long view over present panic. 7, 8, 10. Then the teacher says something that pries open a new door. In my vain life I have seen everything. There is a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man who prolongs his life in his evil doing. 7:15. The retribution formula breaks under certain weather. The teacher bans moral spreadsheets that pretend otherwise. The next lines have sparked centuries of misreading and debate. Be not overly righteous, and do not make yourself too wise. 7:16. Also be not overly wicked, neither be a fool. 7:17. The teacher is not baptizing half-hearted morality. He is dismantling self-righteous manipulation. Overly righteous reads like manufactured religiosity, the theater of moral perfectionism that tries to trap God in a contract. That impulse will not break injustice and will not survive funerals. The wise cling to fear of the Lord instead of mastery of leverage. Surely there is not a righteous man on earth who does good and never sins. 7:20. Humility fits better than swagger. The honesty continues with social realism. Sometimes you hear your servant cursing you, because you curse people when they leave the room too. 7:21-22. No illusions about the office politics of ancient courts. No illusions about yours either. The teacher turns a lantern on government and timing. Keep the king's command, because of God's oath to him. 8:2. There is a time and a way for everything, although man's trouble lies heavy on him. 8:6. Even submission to authority arrives qualified by wisdom. The wicked can secure a proper burial and still face a future the priest cannot fix. 8:10. The earth displays a terrible pattern. Because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the heart of the children of man is fully set to do evil. 8:11. Delay breeds daring in crime. The teacher does not smooth this over. He pronounces that it will go well with those who fear God, but acknowledges a reality that scrapes the paint off credulous piety. There are righteous people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the wicked, and wicked people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the righteous. 8:14. The Odyssey meets street-level observation. Job told the tale of a blameless sufferer. Proverbs taught the rhythm of cause and effect. Ecclesiastes shells both with a third angle. Wisdom includes knowing that formulas crack. The gospel of enjoyment returns with a fuller list. Go, eat your bread with joy, and drink your wine with a merry heart. For God has already approved what you do. 9:7. Let your garments be always white. Let not oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love, all the days of your vain life. 9:8-9. The teacher is not baptizing hedonism. He names gifts at the table, in the closet, in the bedroom. These gifts do not cure death. These gifts defy despair. He adds a line that touches every Monday morning. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. For there is no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol, to which you are going. 19. The stark mortality claim swings like a clock pendulum over every plan. Then comes a line that undercuts hustle culture with a single sentence. The race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor favor to those with knowledge, but time and chance happen to them all. 9:11. Randomness intrudes under the sun. Probability theory storms the boardroom. The teacher is not teaching aimless living. He is naming variables that humiliate pride and reward humility. A forgotten poor wise man saves a city. 9:14-15. And then the town forgets him. The teacher captures the scandal of how memory works in societies that worship spectacle and reward noise. Wisdom is better than weapons of war. 9:18. Yet one sinner destroys much good. The next chapter hangs proverbs like lanterns in a dark alley. Dead flies make the perfumer's ointment give off a stench. 10:1. A single foolish headline can rot a legacy carefully perfumed for years. Folly refuses to stay away from high places. Princes feast in the morning, then the walls sag. A bird of the air may carry your curse to the palace. 10:20. Even your whisper can take flight. The political satire lands with a grin and a warning. Then Ecclesiastes goes agrarian again and tells a parable for investors with dirt under their fingernails. Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. 11:1. The picture probably shows a grain trade or a sowing act with irrigation channels. You release resources with patience. You diversify. Give a portion to 7, or even to 8, for you know not what disaster may happen on earth. 11:2. The language travels well into modern portfolios and ministry budgets. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. 11:4. Perfect conditions never arrive, so paralysis wastes seasons. So morning and evening, let multiple streams run. You do not know which will flourish. The teacher is allergic to paralysis and to presumption in equal measure. Light is sweet, and it is pleasant for the eyes to see the sun. 11:7. The teacher invites youth to rejoice and remove vexation, to remember that the full truth includes an account before God. The final chapter turns poetic in a way that has made funerals tremble for millennia. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come. 12:1. The poem rolls out an extended metaphor of a house and a body in decline. The keepers of the house tremble. The strong men are bent. The grinders cease because they are few, and those who look through the windows are dimmed. 12:3. Arms shake, legs weaken, teeth dwindle, eyes blur. The doors of the street are shut. 12:4. And note, as hearing fades, the almond tree blossoms. 12:5. White hair sprouts. The grasshopper drags itself along. Desire fails. Mortality surfaces like fog off cold water. Before the silver cord is snapped, or the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher is shattered at the fountain. 12:6. The imagery piles up. A lamp cable breaks. A precious bowl smashes. A pulley fails at a well. A wheel cracks at a cistern. Then the declaration that reveals the echo from Genesis to your family's graveyard. The dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. 12:7. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. All is vanity. 12:8. The monologue closes. The frame narrator steps forward again. That narrator says, the teacher was wise, taught knowledge to the people, weighed and arranged many proverbs, and sought to find words of delight, and uprightly he wrote words of truth. 12:9-10. The sentences are not a grump's journal. They are a craftsman's chiseling. The verse about goads and nails arrives with a signature. The words of the wise are like goads, and like nails firmly fixed are the collected sayings. They are given by one shepherd. 12:11. Nails secure structures so that storms cannot flip them. Goads sting oxen forward, so that fields do not go fallow. One shepherd writes above the whole. God's voice rides through rough lines and bright lines alike. Then the famous end drops like a seal's stamp in hot wax. The end of the matter. All has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments. For this is the whole of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment, with every secret thing, whether good or evil. 12:13-14. The fear named here is not terror that cowers. It is reverence that straightens your spine. The commandments do not rescue by collateral. They align a small human life with the one who sees every ledger entry and every unseen kindness. The controversy around this book did not live under a rock. Early Jewish debates reached the Mishnah. Tractate Yadayim reports disputation over whether Ecclesiastes defiles the hands, the rabbinic idiom for whether it is Holy Scripture. The final decision favored inclusion. The book stayed, raw and radiant. Christian readers have argued about Ecclesiastes too. Martin Luther called it a noble little book that detested the world, its pleasures, and everything that belongs to it. Other readers turned it into a nihilist manifesto and ignored the repeated call to joy and reverence. Both extremes miss the strange balance that the teacher wears like a robe. Ecclesiastes is not cynicism baptized. It is grief and gratitude midwifed into wisdom. It refuses to flatter kings. It refuses to deify career. It refuses to lie to the brokenhearted by promising that they misunderstood statistics. Now breathe the literary design again, and notice coherence. Chapters 1 and 12 feel like bracketing pillars. Hevel opens and Hevel closes. The narrator frames the teacher. Inside that frame, cycles unfold. The initial program explores wisdom, pleasure, work, and legacy. The middle section addresses time, justice, oppression, companionship, and worship. The center of gravity sits near 3:11:15 and 5:18:20, where joy as gift arrives like rain in an arid land. The later chapters retest assumptions with proverbs, political satire, and farmer imagery. The final chapter paints aging and death with images that do not need footnotes to make you swallow hard. Then the epilogue slaps the counter to call for reverence and obedience. The coherence is not tidy, in a Hallmark sort of way. It is coherent, like a lifetime of journals and a late breath under the same sky. Ecclesiastes locates itself in a triangle with Proverbs and Job. Proverbs sings with the consistent melody that the fear of the Lord leads to life, with order and reward. Job pushes back by presenting an innocent man who suffers brutally and refuses to confess sin he did not commit. Ecclesiastes stands beside both, nodding at the truth in Proverbs and pointing at the exceptions that show up in morgues and in world markets. The wisdom tradition in the Hebrew Bible never ran as propaganda. It made room for the dissonant chords that make a real symphony bearable. The teacher's voice becomes the old man in the congregation who leans on a cane and refuses to let youth drown in slogans. Now listen to the Hebrew rhythms that English often softens. Hevel, Hevalem, Amar Koheleth. Hevel, Hevalem, Akol, Hevel. The sound repeats, like a drum at dawn. Breath of breaths, vapor of vapors. The definite article falls away, not just meaningless in a philosophical sense. Ephemeral, ungraspable. There is another word that pulls weight. Yithron, profit, advantage, net gain. Ecclesiastes uses it to test every human attempt to secure immortal traction by effort. Another is chelek, portion, lot, the good share that arrives in your plate today, and trains your heart to gratitude rather than gluttony. The phrase tachat hashemesh, under the sun, runs like a refrain pulling the horizon down to the human level. The teacher is not ignoring eternity. He is deliberately pushing our nose into the dust where we build our lives. Under the sun does not erase God. It localizes us. If you trace the carpe diem lines across the book, you will see a pattern. 2, 2, 2, 6, 3, 12, 13, 5, 18, 20, 8, 15, 9, 7, 10, 11, 10, 7. The permission repeats with rising confidence. The voice shifts from simple observation to imperative. Go, eat your bread, drink your wine, wear white, love your spouse, work hard, expect death, but do not let death cancel dinner. Each time the enjoyment is tied to God. Each time the teacher refuses to let guilt or greed steal the gift. The final imperative to rejoice. Remember and remove vexation in chapter 11 puts joy and judgment in the same paragraph. No moral loopholes for playboys. No grim sermons that pretend all cheer is fleshly. God delights in your delight when you delight in Him, within the fear that loves His ways. Ecclesiastes does not leave out prayer. It simply recasts devotion with a more elemental posture. Walk into the house of God to listen. 5. Fewer words, fewer vows. Let your words be few. 5. 2. Is in heaven, and you are on earth. That is not distance that implies indifference. That is orientation that breeds awe. Let your mouth not lead you into sin. 5. Religion has a way of making people into vow machines and oath entrepreneurs. The teacher pulls the plug on grandstanding. Integrity looks like saying less and doing more under God's eye. Academic debates about dating and authorship have their place. The vocabulary that sounds later and the persona that sounds earlier live together in a layered text. If the final composition emerged in the Persian or Hellenistic period, perhaps the 3rd or 4th century BCE, it spoke to a community that had tasted exile, returned with scars, and rediscovered the basic skill of planting vineyards near broken walls. If the core came from Solomon's late reflections, it wore royal failure and divine patience like a garment. The theology does not shift with the date. Judgment remains fixed. Joy remains gift. Hevel remains the honesty that blocks idolatry. The teacher stands as an anti-idol maker. Now pull the camera back to the palace of the Solomonic memory. 1 Kings 10 and 11. Hold a mirror to the teacher's resume and glow uncomfortably. Gold by the talent. Shields hung like trophies. Ivory throne overlaid with gold. Horses imported from Egypt. Then the catalyst of collapse. Wives from many nations bend a king's heart. High places to gods with names still known. The man who wrote or inspired thousands of proverbs collapsed into syncretism that lit incense with imported fire. Ecclesiastes never says the name Solomon. The silhouette says, enough. The teacher sounds like someone who tasted everything and found the flavor bitter where the covenant tasted sweet. Obedience often looks plain. Disobedience often looks decorated. The book tells the truth without a gossip column. A line that many readers memorize for weddings carries battlefield wisdom underneath. 2 are better than 1. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. 4, 9, 12. This is cooperation as survival, not sentimentality on lace. Ecclesiastes lives in a world where people freeze alone, starve alone, or fall to thieves alone. The pictures apply to marriages and to pilgrimage friendships, to startup teams, and to late-night hospital vigils. The teacher salts it with realism. Crowds are fickle. 4:16. Companionship beats isolation anyway. Oppression haunts the book as a constant that kings refuse to notice. The tears of the oppressed and no one to comfort them. 4:1. This line stalks modern supply chains and news cycles. Ecclesiastes refuses to let theology become a private therapy that never walks into the courthouse. The answer offered is not revolution or resignation. The answer is to do good, receive joy, fear God, and remember judgment. The combination creates a stable and stubborn hope. Hope that steers plow handles and files petitions and bakes bread and throws parties and refuses to give despair a room key. The poem about time in chapter 3 places beauty in an uncomfortable seat. God has made everything beautiful in its time. Beauty resides in appointed times, not in blank calendars we fill without counsel. That line turns birthdays and layoffs, weddings and funerals, into scheduled stations where a wise heart asks for the right response instead of forcing a wrong one. The pendulum pairs about war and peace, building and tearing down, scattering stones and gathering stones, show a God who ordains seasons that no one can cancel by effort or extend by money. This frees and frightens. Freedom arrives because you stop pretending you orchestrate weather. Fear arrives because you cannot guarantee your preferred weather for next Friday. The teacher urges joy in the day given, not despair over the day desired. Work remains an arena where Ecclesiastes plants both thorns and roses. Toil can breed hatred when it becomes an altar to self. 2:1-2. 3. Toil turns glorious when it becomes a liturgy of trust. 3:12-13. 5:18-20. The same hammer swings with two different songs. Depending on whom you imagine watches you swing it. The book calls that watcher God. To work under his eye turns shop floors into sanctuaries. To work for the wind turns corner offices into cages. The teacher's focus on speech lands criminology-grade diagnostics. Many words produce folly. 5:3. The voice of a fool is known by many words. 5:3. The internet did not invent noise. Ecclesiastes knew it in courtyards and markets. A quiet heart in worship and a measured tongue in debate sound like anachronisms because pride and fear make tongues heavy. Ecclesiastes calls for lightness that comes from fear of God and disdain for applause. Ecclesiastes also sustains a startling theology of limits. You do not know the work of God who makes everything up. You do not know which seed will prosper, this or that. 11:6. You do not know the day of adversity. 7:14. Ignorance becomes a friend when it humbles control freaks and spares them a God complex. The embrace of limits allies with risk-taking. So in the morning, so in the evening. 11:6. Do not sit paralyzed by the cloud report or postponable predictions. 11:4b. Few pieces of the Bible cut so directly against both reckless presumption and risk-averse idleness in the same breath. When Ecclesiastes says, "Better the day of death than the day of birth," 7:1, it refuses to romanticize funerals. The book simply calculates with a timeline others ignore. A death can seal a good name after a life of tested integrity. A birth, though joyful, begins a journey of contested identity and peril. Wisdom throws weight on the day that measures a life, rather than the day that introduces a possibility. That sort of accounting strips celebrity of most of its glamour. It also elevates ordinary faithfulness to a peak over time. The aging poem in chapter 12 sits beside the Genesis dust line, like a cousin who tells the same story with different imagery. It does not deny resurrection or afterlife. It simply welcomes the reader into a room where the candid camera remains on the body's decay. The golden bowl and silver cord produce a shared gasp across generations, because everyone has watched a precious object break. The picture presses like an icon into imagination, so that youth does not waste the bright hours, and age does not waste sorrow on denial. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come. 12:1. The call names youth as the moment to build a habit of reverence, because reflexes weaken later. Ecclesiastes never promises that late-life repentance is impossible. It promises that momentum matters. The relationship between injustice and divine judgment anchors the final moral. Oppression, bribery, delayed sentences, wicked funerals, forgotten righteous acts, all stand under the eye of a judge who weighs secrets. 12:14. This is not a threat screamed at crowds. It is a comfort for the oppressed and a sober moment for the powerful. God's judgment means your unseen labor matters. It means your private cruelty receives a court date. It means the universe does not run on chaos, even when courts on earth do. Ecclesiastes stands like an art installation in the middle of the Bible, and people walking through it experience vertigo. Someone mutters that the book seems out of place. Then the person looks around and finds Job weeping in ashes and Jeremiah with a yoke across his shoulders. And suddenly, Ecclesiastes feels like a necessary friend. The book hangs a plaque under many human idols: the idol of novelty, the idol of certainty, the idol of earning your own meaning. It takes out a chisel and writes hevel, not worthless, vapor-like, glorious at dawn with light streaming through it, gone by noon, and impossible to hold. The book refuses to let anyone locate ultimate meaning in creaturely gifts, but it also refuses to let anyone despise creaturely gifts as dirty or beneath the holy. That tension fits like a garment tailored by a man who prayed and sinned and suffered and still tasted peaches in summer with Thanksgiving on his lips. Scholars spill ink on the phrase "one shepherd," 12:11. Some read it as God. Others read it as an ideal wisdom figure or as a royal image. The phrase rings with the echo of Israel's scriptures, where God calls himself the shepherd of his people, and where David sings that the Lord is his shepherd. The nails and goads that fix and prod come from that shepherd. The teacher's words bruise and steady because the shepherd aims for fields worth plowing. The collection of sayings stands as a fence not to imprison life, but to protect it. The book's relationship to enjoyment remains the most misunderstood thread. Enjoyment in Ecclesiastes is not earned by moral performance. It arrives as a gift that trains you in gratitude rather than greed. It bends your back toward God's table rather than your mirror. The details matter, and the book offers them with surprising specificity. Bread and wine, oil on your head, a woman you love, white garments, a simple meal after a day of labor. This enjoyment becomes a kind of spiritual warfare that refuses to let despair or entitlement rule a household. It also refuses to let high-minded asceticism masquerade as holiness when it is actually ingratitude. Ecclesiastes turns your head toward your neighbor's tears and then turns you toward your own dinner table without contradiction. It instructs you to fear God and keep his commandments, and then tells you to accept your portion with joy. That pairing installs humility where pride once strutted. It also steels your spine to do good on dull days. The call to fear God breathes ancient air and fits modern lungs. Fear here is not the anxiety of an abused child around a volatile father. It is the reverence of a craftsman before a master artisan, the attentiveness of a sailor reading the wind, the silence of a saint in a chapel with a candle flame. Because Ecclesiastes lives in your house too, it names the phantom called advantage that people chase, that business deal that seems to grant immortality, that publication that seems to cancel mortality, that garage full of achievements that screams security, but cannot hug your daughter or sit at your father's hospice bed without awkwardness. The teacher drags all of it into the light. He names the heartbeat at the bottom. The world breaks your plan, and if you refuse to learn the word gift, the world will break you too. The gift of a meal, the gift of a breath, the gift of companionship, the gift of a job you can do with steady hands, the gift of worship that does not demand attention, the gift of sleep, all of it under the same sun, where wars happen and courts lie and crops grow and grandchildren laugh. The book never lies about the wars. It never lies about the laughter either. Consider the line about the bird carrying a voice, 10:20. That verse rolls into your text thread in board meeting without apology. Speech takes flight beyond your control. A dozen social media screenshots prove the point. Ecclesiastes was not naive about rumor. It was not naive about risk. It taught, both within an economy that assumed God watches and will call to account. That economy allows you to live with courage and caution at once. The honesty about mortality also refuses to let anyone weaponize religion as a death-denying drug. Your spiritual life does not erase funerals. It beautifies faithfulness within them. The teacher's house of mourning pedagogy is for people who want to love reality rather than fantasies. You sit with a grieving family and speak fewer words. You resolve to keep a short account with God and with neighbors. You walk home and cook supper, light a candle, pray a psalm, and put your hand to your craft the next morning with steady energy because you are going to die, and that truth makes your work better, not worse. Ecclesiastes is also a quiet manual for staying human in a world saturated with novelty. There is nothing new under the sun. 1:9. The sentence does not erase invention in technology or art. It kills the addiction to novelty as meaning. Desire for the new as salvation never ends well. New partners, new projects, new ideologies, new identities, new palettes. Without God, every new thing becomes another wind chase that leaves your lungs empty. With God, a new song becomes praise, and a new tool becomes a way to love your neighbor, not a way to justify your existence. A wise reader of Ecclesiastes learns a strange equilibrium. Hold everything as gift. Hold nothing as God. Receive seasons as ordained. Resist evil as commanded. Expect judgment as certain. Enjoy dinner as a small doxology between long wars. Value companionship. Speak fewer words in the temple. Be not surprised by headlines that say the wicked thrive. Be not seduced by ideologies that promise final justice before God's court. Tiny acts of faithfulness matter under the sun, because the one above the sun weighs them with love. The teacher stands somewhere late in life, whether as Solomon glowing in regret, or as a sage behind a Solomonic mask, and his forehead lines red like a topographical map of the human condition. He does not flinch from your most private fears. Any viewer who has stared at the ceiling at 2 a.m. with a panic about death, or legacy, or bills, or children, or failures, finds a friend in Ecclesiastes. It tells you that God stands in heaven, and that his commandments still bind and bless, and that it hands you a slice of bread and tells you to chew slowly and give thanks. That move is subversive in a world of extremes. It is tempting to read Ecclesiastes as a prelude that needs correction from the New Testament, as if the verdict Hevel must be erased by resurrection. The better reading honors its voice as full scripture that Jesus and the apostles would have prayed and pondered. The resurrection does not cancel the wisdom that life under the sun remains vapor-like. It transfigures it. The nails of the one shepherd puncture time and redeem labor and right judgment. The fear of God and the keeping of commandments still name the whole duty of humanity. Grace furnishes the power and atonement required for both, and joy swells rather than shrinks. The book's dramatic purpose for modern hearers lands like a challenge. Break friendship with illusions. Make peace with limits. Learn to receive your portion, small or large, with thanksgiving hooked to fear of God. Defy despair by throwing parties where God is the honored guest. Defy greed by practicing open-handedness that invests in 7 or 8 ventures, 11 including ventures that feed widows and welcome strangers. Defy idolatry by praying in silence more often than you perform in public. Defy cynicism by believing that judgment arrives and nothing done in secret escapes the shepherd's ledger. Add one more thread that the teacher stitched into his cloak, the rhythm of labor and rest. He names sleep as a gift to the laborer, 5:12, and as an enemy of the one with anxious abundance. Your insomnia may have complex causes, and medical care belongs in that conversation. Ecclesiastes still says something fierce. Accumulation without gratitude torments the nervous system. Simple obedience under a sovereign God can rock you to sleep. The teacher's voice returns to you when the promotion forms on the horizon, or when the biopsy results crawl into your inbox. The lines sound as if written last night. Enjoy the wife your love. 9:9. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. 9:10. Fear God and keep his commandments. 12:13. Receive today as portion, not as platform to build a tower to heaven. Towers crumble. Portions shape souls. The final words of the book land as anchors. All has been heard. Not all has been explained. The difference matters. The teacher never promised explanatory mastery. He promised that God's judgment and God's gifts bracket a mortal life so completely that humility and joy become sane. The fear of God looks like steady obedience on boring Tuesdays. The joy of God looks like bread and wine blessed in a kitchen where no one else will ever applaud you. The memory of death looks like wisdom, not morbidity. When it makes you gentle and alert, history confirms that Ecclesiastes kept its seat in the canon because communities recognized themselves in it. Farmers leaned in. Judges leaned back uncomfortably. Kings felt the chill on their necks. Servants nodded at the mention of curses whispered in halls. Brides and grooms smiled at the permission to wear white and light lamps. Carpenters and scribes returned to work and slept with a different kind of tiredness. The words became nails and goads that endured long after the teacher's breath went back to God. So the balcony reappears. The heat shimmers over stone, and the teacher's manuscript lives. Under the sun, life feels like wind through fingers, a vapor caught in a shaft of light, and then gone. Above the sun, the shepherd counts your steps and your words and your tears and your feasts. He writes meaning into your days as gift rather than salary. He secures justice beyond court calendars. He stitches joy into the seams of suffering with a needle made of hope. You stand between balcony and field, between lament and laughter, between funeral and feast, and Ecclesiastes takes you by the elbow, steadies you, and hands you a simple line to carry in your pocket. Fear God. Keep his commandments. Receive your portion with thanks. Chase no winds. Walk in the wind with the one who sent it.